The satellite phone crackled to life at 3 in the morning, pulling Marcus Chen from a restless sleep in his modest apartment in Anchorage, Alaska. For 15 years, he had worked as a wilderness survival engineer, but nothing in his career had prepared him for the desperation he heard in Dr. Sarah Hoffman's voice. She was calling from a research station near the Alaskan-Canadian border, where temperatures had plummeted to -73 degrees Celsius, the coldest readings in recorded history for that region. A group of 12 indigenous Gwich'in nomads, including elderly members and 3 children, had become stranded during their traditional migration route. Their temporary shelters had collapsed under the weight of unexpected ice storms, and they were now huddled in a shallow cave with dwindling supplies and no way out. The rescue helicopters couldn't fly in such extreme conditions, and ground vehicles were useless against the mountainous ice formations that had appeared seemingly overnight. Sarah's voice trembled as she explained that Marcus was their only hope. He was known throughout Alaska for his innovative ice shelter designs and his ability to work in conditions that would kill most people within minutes. She needed him to do the impossible: dig tunnels through solid ice to create a secure underground shelter system that could house the stranded group until the weather broke. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, his mind racing through calculations. At -73 degrees, exposed skin would freeze in less than 2 minutes. Metal tools would become brittle and dangerous. Every breath would feel like inhaling shards of glass. But he also knew that without intervention, those 12 people would die within 48 hours. He had lost his own brother to hypothermia during a climbing expedition in the Brooks Range 10 years ago, a tragedy that had haunted him ever since and driven him to master the art of extreme cold survival. This was his chance to ensure no one else would suffer that fate. Within an hour, Marcus had assembled his gear: specialized thermal drills, insulated pickaxes, portable heating units, and enough high-calorie emergency rations to sustain him through what he estimated would be at least 48 hours of continuous work. He also packed his grandfather's compass, a family heirloom that had guided 3 generations of Chen explorers through impossible terrain. As he loaded his modified snowmobile, designed with reinforced treads and extra fuel capacity, his neighbor Mrs. Patterson emerged from her doorway, wrapped in a thick robe. She was a widow who had known Marcus since he first moved to Alaska, and she had a motherly concern for his dangerous expeditions. She pressed a thermos of hot soup into his hands and made him promise to come back alive. Marcus smiled, though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. The journey to the coordinates Sarah had provided would take 6 hours, through some of the most treacherous wilderness in North America. The landscape was transformed into an alien world of towering ice sculptures and frozen waterfalls that gleamed like crystal cathedrals under the pale Arctic sun. The wind howled with such ferocity that it seemed to have a voice, warning him to turn back. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because you're about to witness a survival story that defies every law of nature and proves that human determination can overcome even the most impossible odds. Marcus arrived at the site just as the weak winter daylight was fading. The temperature gauge on his snowmobile read -71 degrees. He could see the shallow cave entrance where the Gwich'in group was sheltering, marked by a faint glow from their emergency lanterns. Sarah and 2 other researchers met him outside the cave, their faces masked by layers of protective gear. Inside, Marcus encountered the stranded nomads. The eldest, Thomas Netro, was 74 years old, a respected elder who had led his people on this migration route for over 5 decades. Beside him sat his daughter Elena, a strong woman in her 40s who had been trying to keep everyone's spirits up despite their dire situation. The 3 children, aged 6, 9, and 11, were huddled together under every blanket and sleeping bag the group possessed. Their eyes widened when they saw Marcus, and he could see both hope and fear reflected in their young faces. Thomas spoke in measured tones, explaining that their people had survived in these lands for thousands of years, but never had they encountered cold like this. He gestured to the cave walls, which were already showing signs of instability. Without proper ventilation and structural support, the cave could collapse at any moment, or the group could succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning from their heating sources. Marcus assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. He would need to dig a network of tunnels extending from the cave into the more stable ice formations behind it, creating chambers for sleeping, food storage, and a central gathering area. The tunnels would need proper ventilation shafts and would have to be reinforced with ice blocks carved from the excavated material. It was a project that would normally take a team of engineers several weeks with proper equipment. He had 48 hours and only his own 2 hands. He began immediately firing up his thermal drill outside the cave. The machine roared to life, its heated bit designed to melt through ice while simultaneously flash freezing the tunnel walls behind it to create a smooth, stable surface. The noise was deafening, but it was also strangely comforting to everyone inside the cave. It meant someone was fighting for their survival. Marcus worked in 2-hour shifts, the maximum anyone could endure in such cold even with the best protective gear. After each shift, he would return to the cave, strip off his outer layers which were frozen solid, warm his core temperature with heated packs, consume 1,000 calories of dense food, and then suit up again. Sarah and the other researchers took turns monitoring his vital signs and preparing his equipment for the next shift. Elena, despite her own exhaustion, organized the children to help sort supplies and keep track of time. She told them stories of her ancestors who had survived similar challenges, giving them courage. During one of his brief rest periods, Marcus sat with young Jamie, the 11-year-old boy who reminded him painfully of his late brother. Jamie asked if they were going to die. Marcus looked into the child's eyes and made a promise. As long as he had strength in his body and breath in his lungs, he would not let that happen. The boy nodded solemnly, and from that moment on, he stationed himself near the tunnel entrance during Marcus's shifts, as if his presence alone could will the rescue to succeed. The tunnels progressed meter by painful meter. Marcus's hands, even through insulated gloves, began to show signs of frostbite. His face was a mass of ice crystals that had to be carefully thawed during each rest period. His lungs burned with every breath, and his muscles screamed in protest. But he continued. He carved sleeping chambers into the walls, each designed to hold 2 or 3 people with enough insulation to maintain survivable temperatures. He created a ventilation system using principles of natural convection, allowing fresh air to flow through the tunnels while expelling dangerous carbon monoxide. By the 30-hour mark, Marcus had completed 60% of the essential tunnel system, but his body was failing. Sarah pulled him aside during one rest period and told him bluntly that his core temperature was dropping to dangerous levels, and his cognitive function was showing signs of impairment. If he continued, he might not survive. Marcus listened to her concerns, then quietly told her about his brother, about how he had frozen to death while Marcus, younger and less experienced, had been unable to save him. He explained that he had spent 10 years preparing for a moment like this, a chance to redeem that failure. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she understood. She adjusted his heating packs and prepared extra strong coffee for his next shift. Thomas Netro approached Marcus during the 36th hour. The elder had been watching everything with quiet dignity. He placed a weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder and spoke in his native language, which Elena translated. He said that Marcus carried the spirit of a true warrior, someone who put others before himself. He said that regardless of what happened, Marcus had already honored his brother's memory and proven that humanity's greatest strength was not in avoiding death but in refusing to let others die alone. The words gave Marcus renewed strength. At the 40-hour mark, disaster struck. A section of the main tunnel collapsed, blocking access to the nearly completed sleeping chambers. Ice blocks, each weighing hundreds of kilograms, had shifted due to pressure changes from the extreme cold. Marcus stared at the rubble, his exhausted mind struggling to calculate solutions. He had 8 hours left before his deadline, before hypothermia and carbon monoxide would begin claiming lives. Starting over wasn't an option. He would have to clear the collapse by hand, block by block, in a space so confined he could barely move. He crawled into the narrow gap at the top of the debris pile and began passing ice blocks backward to where Sarah and Elena waited to carry them away. The work was agonizing. His shoulders were so tight with cold and fatigue that every movement sent shooting pain through his body. His fingers could barely grip the ice. But he thought of Jamie's question, of his promise, of his brother's frozen face in that mountain cave a decade ago, and he continued. If you're watching this and thinking about giving up on something in your own life, write in the comments, "I never give up." Let me see who's watching this and finding their own strength. Elena worked beside him when she could, her presence a silent encouragement. She told him about her son, Jamie's older brother, who had died 3 years ago in a fishing accident. She said she understood his need to save people because she lived with the same guilt, wondering if she could have done something differently. They worked in companionable silence, 2 souls bound by loss and determination. At the 45-hour mark, with only 3 hours remaining, Marcus broke through the collapse. The sleeping chambers were accessible again, and the ventilation system was functional. He began the final phase, moving the Gwich'in group into their new shelter. One by one, wrapped in every piece of thermal protection they possessed, the Nomads made the short but treacherous journey through the tunnels. The children went first, their eyes wide with wonder at the ice palace Marcus had created. Thomas came last, insisting that elders should always ensure the young ones are safe before seeing to their own comfort. Once everyone was settled into the sleeping chambers, with heating units running and fresh air flowing, Marcus allowed himself to collapse. His body simply gave out. 48 hours of impossible labor finally claiming their due. Sarah and Elena dragged him into one of the chambers and began emergency warming protocols. For 6 hours, Marcus hovered in a semi-conscious state, his body fighting to recover from the most extreme physical ordeal of his life. When he finally woke, he found Jamie sitting next to him, holding his grandfather's compass. The boy had retrieved it from Marcus's gear and had been keeping watch over him. Jamie said that his grandfather Thomas had explained that the compass represented more than direction. It represented purpose and the courage to follow it even when the path seemed impossible. 2 days later, the weather finally broke. The temperature rose to a relatively balmy -40 degrees Celsius, and rescue helicopters were able to reach the site. The Gwich'in Nomads, all 12 of them, were evacuated to safety, suffering from minor frostbite and exhaustion, but alive. Marcus was also airlifted out, treated for severe frostbite on his hands and feet, and hospitalized for a week to recover from the ordeal. The story of the ice tunnels spread rapidly through Alaska and beyond. News crews descended on Anchorage, wanting to interview the engineer who had accomplished the impossible. But Marcus refused most interviews, insisting that he had simply done what needed to be done. He did agree to one interview, arranged by Sarah, where he could tell the story properly and honor the strength of the Gwich'in people who had maintained their dignity and hope, even in their darkest hours. 3 months later, Marcus received an invitation to a celebration at the Gwich'in community near Fairbanks. He drove there on a spring day when the tundra was beginning to bloom with tiny Arctic flowers, a stark contrast to the frozen hellscape he remembered. The community had gathered to honor him with a traditional ceremony. Thomas Netro, looking healthier and stronger than Marcus remembered, presented him with a handcrafted knife made from caribou bone and steel, a weapon and tool that represented survival and respect. Elena stepped forward next, her face beaming with pride, and announced that the community had voted unanimously to make Marcus an honorary member of their tribe. She explained that he had demonstrated the core values of their people: courage, selflessness, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Young Jamie, now 3 months older and filled with the confidence of someone who had survived the unthinkable, gave Marcus a drawing he had made. It showed a stick figure with a drill standing in front of ice tunnels, with 12 people safely inside and a sun rising in the background. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, were the words, "My hero." Marcus felt tears freezing on his cheeks despite the warm spring air. These were not tears of sadness, but of release, of finally letting go of the guilt he had carried for a decade. He realized that he hadn't just saved 12 lives in those tunnels. He had saved himself. That night, the community gathered around a fire, and Thomas told the story of the ice tunnels in the traditional way, as a legend that would be passed down through generations. He spoke of the engineer from the south who had come with metal that could melt ice and a heart that could not be frozen. He spoke of 48 hours when death seemed certain but life prevailed through human will. Marcus listened and understood that his brother's death, while tragic, had led him to this moment, to these people, to a purpose larger than his own grief. Sarah, who had driven up from Anchorage for the celebration, sat next to Marcus and whispered that the ice tunnels had been documented and studied. Engineers from around the world were analyzing his techniques, which could revolutionize emergency shelter construction in extreme conditions. What he had done under impossible circumstances might save thousands of lives in future disasters. Marcus nodded, but found that he cared less about the recognition than about the simple fact that Jamie and the other children were laughing and playing, their futures secured. As the celebration continued, Marcus walked to the edge of the gathering and looked up at the night sky. The aurora borealis danced overhead, ribbons of green and purple light that his brother had loved. He pulled out his grandfather's compass, the one Jamie had protected during his darkest hours, and felt its familiar weight. The needle pointed north, always toward the next challenge. the next person who might need help, the next impossible task that would require every ounce of courage and skill. If you watched this story until the very end, leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end so I can meet you and know who truly appreciates the stories on this channel." And if this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that nothing is truly impossible when we refuse to give up. Subscribe to this channel for more incredible true survival stories that prove the power of human determination. And ring that notification bell, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. Marcus Chen returned to Anchorage a different man. The scars on his hands from frostbite would remain for life, a permanent reminder of those 48 hours in the frozen darkness. But they were badges of honor, proof that one person, armed with skill, determination, and the memory of those they've lost, can stand against impossible odds and win. The last group of nomads had been saved, and in saving them, Marcus had finally saved himself from the frozen grip of guilt and regret that had held him for so long. The tunnels carved into the ice at -73 degrees would eventually melt, but the story of what happened there would remain forever, frozen in time like a snapshot of humanity's finest moment.